So Edwin was most recently head of Barclays Asia Pacific, TMT, based in Hong Kong. His key sectors coverage includes internet, education, information services, data center, television, cinema, and exhibition companies. Prior to joining Barclays, he worked at Goldman Sachs in London and Bain & Company in Singapore and LA. Edwin holds an MBA from the Wharton School and Mass Engineering and Civil Engineering from Imperial College London. So first of all, thank you, and please thank you for joining us for this webinar tonight. Edwin, please go ahead, and I'll bring the mic to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Catherine, for the invitation. Hello, everybody. Great to meet and to have a chance to present to you guys. What I wanted to do very quickly today was to go through the China online education market. It is a very, very vibrant market. Just to give you two anecdotes, when in March, when the whole was collapsing, a Chinese company raised $1 billion. The company is called Yuanfudao, and the company focuses on online education. I helped IPO a business called GSX in the US Stock Exchange in June last year. The company was IPO'd at 2.7 billion. The company's now worth 20 billion. I think that, that's an 8x increase and highlights basically the strength of the business model, as well as the rapid adoption that we're seeing in China. I cover online education and offline education throughout the world as well. But I think that the online education market really is mainly China. Of course, there are Pluralsight and the rest in structure and the likes in the US. But I think that on a 2C focus on consumer basis, I think China leads the way. And I think that's where we'll focus our conversation on. If you guys want, happy to touch a little bit on an Indian conglomerate, Indian startup called Byju's. Very familiar with them as well. But I think today we'll just focus on China. China, as you can imagine, I'm not going to go through every stat here, but I think the idea here is it's big. And the Chinese do focus on this as a priority spend. As you can see, 10% of households spend money on online, on after-school tutoring, AST, and they spend about $100 each. And that being 10% of income is quite significant. And as you can see, even just in the primary school market, there's 104 million students in 2019. What we find in that online education, and these are all pre-COVID estimates, you'll find that in 2019, there were only 15% of students that did online after-school tutoring. And in 2025, the expectation is 41. I would have guessed that will go up to in the 50s, given the massive adoption you have right now. And as you can see, the market is supposed to grow 7x in 5 years, right? And that's basically pre-COVID again. So if you take a look at the Chinese education market overview, suffice to say, there are many, many students in China because it's the most populous country in the world. But I just want to highlight two things from this chart, that in the middle school and high school, there are SAT equivalent gates, right? So you've got the Zhongkao, which is the bottom right, as well as the Gaokao. And these exams are extremely important and happens only once. The Gaokao is like an SAT exit exam before you go to university, and most of your entry is based on that one exam, and it's a numerical number you get back. And so, only 0.1% of the students get into the Harvard, Princeton, Yale's equivalent of China, which is Beida and Tsinghua. And so what happens is that people actually take the time to repeat the Gaokao. So what they'll do is that they'll take the Gaokao 1 year in their senior year of high school. They are the top 2% of the entire China. That's not good enough for some of them. They'll repeat it again. That just gives you another anecdote in terms of how strong Chinese view education. If you take a look at the next slide, you see that basically the dark bar on the left shows the number of students that do after-school tutoring. As you can see, even today, it's in the 100 million mark. But you can see the light blue bar on the left side growing. The penetration in terms of the red line is also going up to the 40%. And you can see the right side, the market is growing 7x in a 6-year time frame. To help you understand, I think that, of course, there's a lot of offline after-school tutoring in China, but I think that the call today will focus on the online side of it. And on the online side of it, I would say these are the 6 large players. You've got TAL that started its life as an offline player. And then you've got GSX, that is the company that is now worth $20 billion, focused on only one thing, which is basically, and I'll say this slowly, online, live, large class tutoring. So basically, what you have is just like what I'm doing right now. You have a teacher, and what you will do is you will stream to thousands of students at a time. And that's why the teacher would pick up the ticket where everybody paid for class. And if you multiply that small ticket by 1,000, that's quite a lot of revenue. And that's why that business model is now the predominant monetization model in China. You find that the next 3 on the list, Yuanfudao, Zuoyebang, Zuoye, all these 3 have different components, which therefore give it a lot of traffic. And their monetization model is basically using this traffic and making it delivering a product exactly the same as GSX to be able to monetize this online, live, large class format tutoring. So that's a quick overview of the market. If you take a look here, I'm sure if you cover the Chinese market, you've heard of companies like VIP Kit. I think that is the leader in the one-on-one English tutoring. But I think that if you take a look at this chart, you see the large class. The large class is where the financial rewards are. The large class is where everybody is moving towards. In addition, within the large class, you also see the last column, the AI pre-recorded. That is also making a big dent into the market because I think that the Chinese market, the AI is extremely strong. I think there are tools here that, you know, from a US perspective, you will be surprised by what they can do. Just to give you a sense, if you are helping your 15-year-old do his math homework and you couldn't figure it out because it's just been too long ago, you could take a camera, take a picture of the math question, put it through the app, and it will come up with the solution. So the businesses here are so good that they can do, first of all, optical character recognition, OCR. Then they have the ability to digest the question, to create the answer and send it back to you in milliseconds. It also has the ability, for example, like zebra thinking on the bottom right, for you to do speech kind of repeating and therefore to grade you. So you would say, positioning of major Chinese ASD operators, you would say that line, they would actually grade your level of pronunciation so as to help you using technology. So I think that, you know, Chinese online tech is leading the way and I think will be a big driver. They're all focused internally on China because of the large market that is happy to pay. But I think in the near term, you'll see the Chinese technologies being exported elsewhere in the world. And because they're so advanced, I think they'll pretty much, you know, just as people like to say software is going to eat the world, I would say Chinese education is going to eat the world. I'll focus right now on the star in the market, GSX Tech EDU. As you can see, this was from last week, Friday. You know, you can see that the stock opened at $10 when the IPO, and now it's in the 80s. Right? This company does only one thing, but if you think about it, it does tutoring, online, large class. For the elementary school, it provides for English, math, Mandarin. But then as you go to high school, it has got a lot more courses available. This is the slide. I'll stop for a minute. You'll find that the average students per class has gone up. And that has been what I call the key driver of the business. You've got economies of scale like no other, and that's why, you know, the compensation for instructors, the compensation for tutors all go down. So how it works is that, let's just say I am a teacher at GSX, I'm teaching this course on online China education. You, the students, would have me on the instructor side of things, but you also have your own personal tutor. Your personal tutor will focus on answering your questions that you have during this online webinar. Your personal tutor will be sending you messages to be able to help you with your homework. They'll be sending you extra homework before and after class to consolidate what we've learned in the previous class as well as in the current class. And they will just be, your tutor. And that's why if you take a look at the yellow bar, that's 7%, 6%, that is the tutor that's tied to you. So this model has been so successful. If you take a look at the revenue of the business, you're seeing 5x year-on-year growth for GSX on the net revenue side of things, and even higher on the gross profit side of things. And you can see the margins, as I mentioned, going from 56 to 80%. So I think I'll end there as an intro. I think what we wanted to do here today was to have much more of a Q&A session. So maybe what I'll do is I'll stop here and to take some questions, and I can dive deeper into topics as instructed.
Great. So thanks for everyone to join. I think we have a couple new joiners. Tony and Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself before we go into Q&A?
Hey, thanks, Catherine. This is Tony. I don't know if everyone can hear me. I'm a director for asset management, focusing on recognizing.
All right, Tony, you're cutting out a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, sorry guys. This is Tony. I'm with Gopher Asset Management, focusing on the direct investment, based in Silicon Valley. Very nice meeting you guys online. Thanks so much for organizing this.
Thanks, Tony. Hey, Anthony.
Hey, this is Anthony. I am based in Silicon Valley in the technology sector. I've been an investment banker, a venture capitalist, and lived in the US, Europe, as well as China. And interested in hearing you dive deeper into the Chinese Edtech space.
Great, thanks, Anthony. So as the first question, I guess I'll ask on behalf of the group. You mentioned a couple top major Chinese AST players such as 学而思、跟谁学、Yuanfudao、Zuoyebang、一起学 and 新东方. So can you just give us a little bit more overview on how are these different players emerged, and what's the history of China Edtech? How do we think about this industry as a whole? Thank you.
Sure. So I would say that China education started off with New Oriental. I think that most of the people from this call from Chinese background might have gone through that path. New Oriental is what you call a study abroad consulting business, helping with TOEFL and the likes and SATs. And so New Oriental offline was what started off Chinese education's after school tutoring in a big way, in terms of, not in terms of a mom and pop operator locally, but in a much more corporate way. Then you had TAL, which started doing what you call Math Olympiad, and therefore focusing on the math side. So you've got New Oriental coming in from the study abroad side. You got TAL coming in from the Math Olympiad side, and both became, multi-billion, $20, $40 billion companies now listed in the US. But always focus on the offline. Then what happens is that, with everything moving to online, you've got Alibaba and Tencent and the likes in China, you started to have people that wanted to move the offline experience online because there's such great economies of scale. And basically the winners, or the big players, if I want to call it, in the Chinese education business have historically been the ones that have been able to get the largest number of users. So the big use case for a Chinese edtech maybe 5 years ago was a parent at home not being able to help the child with their homework because it's too difficult, or a child themselves not being able to figure them out while parents are away. So the main app that was developed was what you call a SOTI app, which allows you to take a picture of the app and then get the answer relayed to you back in seconds. And the problem with this app, while it's very good and very, very high usage, Zuoyebang said they got 800 million downloads, more than 100 million users every day. I think that the difficulty for them is that it's very difficult to monetize that. Do you charge a subscription to the app? Do you charge a transaction fee per answer that they get? all these are micro payments and really don't move the needle. And because there are also other companies that do the same, it's very difficult to monetize. So the online education market went through a period where you have very, very high volumes, very, very low monetization. So you have Zuoyebang on one side, then you have Yuanfudao that wanted to do more online education, focus on one-on-one, but realizing the economics are difficult. Then you also have Yiqi Zuoye is what you call a learning management system. It's a way for homework distribution so that parents, teachers, students can all be aware of what's been distributed as homework. Submission can happen online, marking can happen online, and everything runs on that platform. Again, because these are learning management systems put with schools, it's very difficult to charge schools, particularly if they are government-owned schools. And so monetization was weak. You could try to put in extra homework opportunities, but would a student really pay $2 more to take 100 more questions? They really don't want to do more. So that became a tough monetization model. Then in 2017 came a company called GSX. GSX basically it started by the number 2 in New Oriental called Mr. Chen, Larry Chen. And GSX basically used to be what you call a marketplace for online education. So just like you have listings, you would go there to find the best math teacher. You would pay $100 per term, and GSX will take a 25% cut. However, they realized that the marketplace model was not as good as being a direct operator, so they pivoted from a marketplace to a direct operator. They got their star tutors to be their tutors. And effectively, they launched the online live stream large class format tutoring. When they went to market late last year, June last year, and that's even before their 5th year anniversary at 2.7 bill, everybody else started to catch on this model. And that's why what you're finding is that Yuanfudao is using their traffic, Zuoyebang is using their traffic, and they're using all this traffic to then monetize on the large class format. So again, TAL as well. TAL is maybe more advanced technologically than New Oriental. And that's why TAL's web school is one of the largest. I would say the big 4 operators right now, TAL Web School, GSX, Yuanfudao, and Zuoyebang in terms of the students as well as revenue in this side. And so because the gross margins are great. I've shown you the charts. GSX has gross margins of 80%, because versus a offline school, they don't have rent. Their teachers can teach 1 to 1,000, 1 to 2,000, 10,000 if you really need to. But more importantly, and that's for just one class. So if a math tutor teaches Monday, grade 5, they can teach Tuesday, grade 6, Wednesday, grade 7. They can scale up 5 sessions a week, and then over 3 semesters, 4 semesters, you can do quite a lot. Versus, if you're a very good offline teacher, you would only do it maybe in a 1 to 20, 1 to 50 kind of ratio. So you could pay the star teachers a lot more, and therefore get the best communicators. Effectively, to be able to do it online, just like you are listening to a webinar right now. Imagine you're listening for an hour and a half. The presenter really needs to be very, very content heavy, very, very punchy, kind of like stop and maybe play the guitar for 2 minutes just to lighten up the thing. So it becomes like a performance for 1.5 hours if you do this every Monday night. So, they have honed it into an art, and to be able to also teach the best concepts in the most concise way, but also to be able to have a guess in terms of what kind of questions will come out in the exam, and therefore what will the ministry focus exams on. So hopefully that gives a quick overview in terms of how the market evolved from offline to online, and why everybody's moving to the GXX model, because the scalability and the ability to make parents pay 3-digit dollar figures per semester helps in terms of monetization, because getting parents to pay for an app that can take pictures of questions just wasn't doing it.
Great, thanks, Edwin. I see here that Chris has a question. What is the large company called the personal tutor virtual business? And Chris, if you like to also add on to your question. I see that you have a question in the chat room. I'm not sure if your mic has been fixed. Maybe we can come back to you if your mic is not working. All right, let's open up the question to the rest of the group. If anyone has questions, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Edwin. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, I just had a question about how you, or what steps you think that Chinese edtech companies need to take to both break into the global edtech market and compete with larger players.
I would say that, you know, it's not difficult at all for them to compete in the global market. But the difficulty right now is that you see this in online in China as well. China is blessed. China is blessed because it has 1.4 billion people, and it's blessed because you know, the population does prioritize education. 5 words sold the GSX IPO: China, education, online, revenue growth, profitability, right? So, and I would highlight that, you know, the Yuanfudao business that raised 1 billion at 8 billion valuation in March of 2020, which is when the whole world collapsed, is not profitable. That shows you how much people appreciate the business model and can see the unit economics, such that, you know, even when the whole world's collapsing, $1 billion to be put as a check is huge. So to your question in terms of these companies coming out, you see I have not seen anyone in the Western market develop apps like what we spoke about. And China is not, the Chinese operators are not focused outside of China at all, because they're just focused internally, because the market is big and it is a land grab. You saw the adoption charts going up. And once they are finished positioning and jostling internally, they will then roll out globally, and technologically wise, they are way ahead. So I think that in a 3 to 5 year time frame, when you see growth in China start to taper down, you'll see all these apps make it to the US markets and everywhere else, and, you know, will be a game changer to the markets in the Western world.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Luis?
Hi, Edwin. You mentioned very interesting about the Yuanfudao, about the valuation just now, and you also mentioned the growth for the TAL. Seems both has been very popular among the investors. So actually, this question is both to you and Catherine. So how do you think going forward the trend for the growth for those two, Yuanfudao and the TAL, and what do you think for the market interaction with them, what the market response to them in terms of the capital market?
Yeah, so to your point, Luis, I think that the market is very aware of TAL's web school. If you take a look at broker research, you know, when we IPO GSX last year, I think TAL only made up maybe 20% of the TAL web school only made up 20% of the sum of the parts of TAL. Depending on who you look at right now, some think it's worth more than 50% of TAL, because I think that the growth is going to be there. I think that, you know, the chart that I showed earlier of it going to 40%, there's a question mark in terms of how much online education can be in China. So as I mentioned earlier in the call as well, online tutoring is good for better students, right? So if you're a stronger student, you're really motivated, you can take 1.5 hours in front of a computer and just listen. If you are a child that really has, you know, more middle of the pack or the lower tier, it's very difficult for you to motivate yourself to listen, even though parents are behind you and making sure you try. And therefore, there's a very strong element of childcare, child minding as part of after-school tutoring as well, which is why while I am bullish on online education, I'm also bullish on offline education. Because while online has seen a huge adoption, I think that parents do feel that, you know, having a child go into an environment, it's just like how I'm bullish on K-12 offline schools, right? You know, there's a lot of question marks now in terms of, you know, we're all learning from home. You know, are schools even relevant these days? I think schools are relevant, right? Because I think that the atmosphere, you being in a class with 20 other kids doing after school tutoring does add to your learning, because you're seeing this other 19 kids all the time. You are learning from each other, and that environment of physically going there could actually help the attention. So I think that, you know, we don't think that offline is necessarily going away. There will be an equilibrium. To your point, I think that for online, there will be a saturation point. And that's when, to the other question, you know, once China's saturated, the Chinese will leave and go tackle the Western markets. But I think that, you know, what that saturation point is, you know, is to be seen. Hopefully that helps, Luis.
So I see that Chris has another question. What's the primary payment plan for these products? Can you go into detail on that?
What do you mean by primary payment plan, Chris? In terms of, if I had to hazard a guess to what you're asking, these are typically for the whole term. So you would actually have to pay up for 10 lessons in a row or 20 lessons in a row, and you pay upfront. Hopefully that answers your question.
Maybe we can, just as an extension of Chris' question, we looked at a couple of different companies such as Zuoyebang, Yuanfudao, some of these new live China online e-learning platforms. We know that, you know, earlier this year in March, Yuanfudao just raised 1 billion from Hill House and Tencent. So can you maybe give us a little background on how these companies come about? Why are they raising billions of dollars? And currently, you know, in the China e-learning platform space, a lot of artificial intelligence algorithm is being played in terms of why these companies are doing things differently. Can you give your opinion on how does artificial intelligence play in online China e-learning?
Sure. If I could just summarize the question again, I think there's two parts. Why are they raising money, and how does online AI impact it?
Thank you.
So in terms of raising money, it is still, as I defined earlier, a land grab in China. So what you have is that the Chinese market is one where people are, there's a lot of students out there. So can you imagine, you know, you are seeing this globally as well. There are a lot of students that would not typically consider online learning, that are considering online learning. And right now, you know, let's just call it 50% is the break point in terms of online penetration. You are trying to hit what you call the low-hanging fruits, and therefore the students that are more likely to adopt, particularly over the coronavirus time, and therefore you are spending money to acquire these customers. The reason why these companies are able to raise up to $1 billion, both Yuanfudao and Zuoyebang, is because even though they are not profitable as a whole, they are profitable on a per student basis. So if Edwin was a student in Zuoyebang, Edwin would be a profitable student, and then they will use the money to go acquire Kelly, Louise, Catherine, Michael, and everybody else. So that's why, because it is the, what you call the upfront acquisition, customer acquisition cost, that's why they can't, and they're raising money for the upfront acquisition cost. On the AI side of things, they are starting to develop very, very strong AI, and therefore they call it personalized learning. A big chunk of the Yuanfudao revenue and valuation consideration is on this business called Zebra English or Zebra Math. And basically what they do is that they give you questions and answers, and depending on your progression, they fast track you to the next level or they slow track you to the next level. So in that sense, there's AI in play there. But if to give you another example, Rhea, of how AI plays well in the Chinese market, there's a business called Dingdong Ketang, which basically is an avatar. So think of it as, Barack Obama teaching English. So what they do is that they take Barack Obama's face, they superimpose it onto an avatar, and they can make the avatar say whatever it wants. Just like you can make deepfake say, make a face say whatever it wants. But what it does is that it takes into account the audio feedback from the student that then creates the language in terms of the text of what the avatar will speak back to the student. So what you can do is from the 0 to 8 one-on-one English, you can actually have a computer teach a child and therefore significantly lower the variable costs. So I think that, AI will be helpful for personalization, but AI will also be helpful for delivery. AI will be able to helpful for delivery to make it look like real life tutoring. And therefore, when you have a product like that, you will just be able to scale beyond China very, very quickly. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. So Anthony, I see you have a question. Would you like to ask it?
Sure. Thanks, Edwin. One question I have is getting your view on the professional or the corporate skills learning market. Do you see, what is your thought on that? Do you think that that market opportunity is, as big or, potentially bigger than the K-12 or college student, sort of learning market? And do you think that the current crop of online education companies will expand into this professional learning market, or do you think there'll be different companies who tackle it?
Yeah, so on the US side of professional learning, I think Pluralsight is doing very well on that corporate learning market. I think in China, a lot of it, there's less of it. The problem with China is that you really have a lot of people, and everybody's trying to make it out to the top universities like the Harvards and the Cambridges of China. And what happens is that it becomes an arms race because all families, if you think about it, it's what I call an inverted pyramid, right? So you've got 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and 1 child typically, maybe now coming up to 2. But still, there's a lot of resources that are available to be put into that 1 child and all the hopes and dreams, if you want to call it a focus there. And that's why, because A, it's a bigger number of people, B, because of the hopes and dreams, C, the TAM, and therefore the value of the market is significantly larger than the professional and corporate skills market. And that's why all of it is focused on that market first, because you go to where the biggest TAM is. GSX, interestingly enough, also does professional learning. So they also have star teachers that teach accounting and everything else on that basis. But the difficulty is that, the willingness to pay among the corporate or outside of work is not that much. But you're also starting to see the Pluralsight equivalents in China come up in terms of corporate training. So I would say it is a market, it is dwarfed by the K-12, but it will be a market. And as you see these guys develop the skills and the right way of teaching it, you will see them starting to expand into corporate and professional skills as well.
Great, so Chris here has another question. I wonder why no one is doing GXX style one-to-many in the US. What's your thoughts there? Does it just not work in the US?
I think that the one-to-many will work in the US. I think that, the propensity to pay is less than China, but I can see it working in the US. I think that, if you have a teacher that is able to capture the imagination and then to be able to drive student growth, and that needs to drive, because in the end, you see, let's just get to the point of why do we have after-school tutoring? You have after-school tutoring because people are not motivated and people are semi-lazy, right? So it's equivalent to why do you have personal trainers, right? So when you have personal trainers, you are able, when you go and sign up for a personal trainer or a one-to-many, Zoom gym class versus a one-on-one gym class, what it is to say, I'm paying someone to make sure that I go to the gym. I'm paying someone to make sure I exercise. So the idea of after-school tutoring is very much a encouragement and hand-holding idea where, as long as you showing up is 90% of the battle in the gym. And showing up is also 98% of the battle in after school tutoring. So showing up and paying for it and showing up actually works. So, you're going to have a population, particularly with, say, the Asian population in the US. If you tell them you've got SAT, one-to-many live stream, and this tutor is very, very good at explaining math concepts, will it take off? Sure, it will. So do I think that will take off? Yes. How big the market is, unfortunately, I think it'll be smaller than China, just because there's more students in China to start. But I think that the propensity to want to pay for that, because it is so much more difficult in China. I think that if you take a look, not many households, in the US pay $100 per child per year. Hey, sorry, $100 per month per child per year. So that's $1,200.
Great, thanks, Edwin. Does anybody else have any questions? Please raise your hand. I see that we also have two other new joiners, Jen and also Brian. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Brian Song. I just joined, got introduced by Sachin, so I'm glad to join. Sorry I joined late, I missed a lot of stuff, but I'll just follow through on the questions and see what you guys discuss. Thank you.
No worries. Well, I might have a question here. Melody, you work at Coursera, so this is a US edtech play. What's your take on China edtech versus US edtech?
Thanks for the question. I think mostly I agree with the presenter's viewpoints. I think China market is definitely larger than the US market. I think most of the edtech companies in the US, especially to consumer, kind of struggles a little bit with monetization and willingness to pay. And I've seen more interesting investing opportunity in the US market related to how do you actually sell through the school systems. I think that's something that's that might be slightly different from the China market. While like the China market, it kind of focuses more on direct to consumer. We'd also love to hear from the panelists. What's your view on the edtech market in China when it comes to selling direct to school?
Sure. So I think that the school market is not easy, because I think that the private schools are few. Most of them are government schools. You see that Zuoyebang is predominantly the provider of LMS to these schools, particularly government schools. And it is not easy, because you can't go to the markets and say, hey, I've got the China school market locked up and I'm going to raise prices on them every year. I think that's not going to be very well received. So I think that, you need to provide it nearly at cost to the government schools if you want to sell to the schools, and then you need to monetize on a 2C basis, which is why I think that, going on a school basis, just because predominant of the majority of the schools are state schools, it is not easy to monetize that way. Whereas I think that, the school districts in the US are much more happy to pay. And also they are a lot more private in nature. So I think that a lot more private schools in nature. So I think that it's easier that way in the Western markets. And I think that, while the schools can pick up these programs, the wave and the flood and the motivation and the drive from the parents actually are just so strong. And that's why I agree with you, Melody. China is very much a 2C platform. It's very much an arms race, because most have only one or two children and they work so hard. The Chinese mentality just seems to be that, education is the way out. And, I will invest every additional disposable income I have to to provide the best money can buy.
Great. We actually have a question also from Kai Wai. Is Kai here? Okay. If not, does anybody else have any questions? Please raise your hand. Luis, do you have another question?
Yes, actually, it's very inspiring about the growth, about especially in the time of the COVID time. And now, when we're looking forward for the next 2 or 3 years of the online education market, you mentioned that that there's always like a focus and a lot of resource on the education for primary school or even the high school for the exam preparation. What do you think may be the driver for the continuous of the growth in the online education market?
Yeah, I think the online education market will reach saturation point. I think that, you know, most families in China are dual income working families. And even if they are not, and you have a stay-at-home mom or dad, then, you know, you also have the resource requirement, right? In terms of you having to be at home while a child is taking online class. Dropping them off at a offline class is easier, because then you just drop them off at, you know, 5 p.m. You pick them up at 8 p.m. You have 5 to 8 p.m. to go do whatever errands you need to run. So again, you know, I think that the way one thinks about online education is similar to how you think about Netflix in the US. So as you can see, Netflix had huge increase in users in Q1 and Q2 this year. And, you know, I think Reed Hastings was guiding towards just a 2.5 million increase in Q3 because a lot of what they call the demand has been pulled forward. I think that, you know, there's still such a untapped market in China that, of course, they're pulling forward some of the 2021, 2022 demand. So that's why I think that this summer period, which is the main promotion period in China, will be extremely vibrant and competitive. I was speaking to one person yesterday who runs one of these businesses. He's saying, look, it's a week-on-week battle, right? Every week you have a different promotion, and then you score yourself, you know, you're ranked 1 to 10 on that week, and then, you know, you have a different promotion next week and you fight again. So I'd say that, you know, the growth will be very strong, because I think that right now adoption is strong, but I think that you'll be pulling forward a lot of demand from 21, 22, maybe even from 2023. But I think that it'll reach a saturation point because of the offline part that I mentioned in terms of that balance. I think that, you know, the point also is that, you know, it all comes down to efficacy. You will find that, you know, for all the wonders of online, I think that, you know, there are some students that are fit to learn online. There are some students that are fit to learn offline. And I think that that definition and characterization will be clearer for parents. And as that becomes clearer, then, you know, you have a more bifurcated market in terms of my child is much more of an online learner, my child is more of an offline learner. And I think that will drive a different segmentation going forward. So I would say growth will be high for the near term, but, you know, it will be taking from growth from the medium term, and it will then stabilize, and then you'll see all these Chinese go abroad.
Great, thanks, Edwin. And I have a question from Kai Wai. In light of the current geopolitical issues, have you seen any shifts in Chinese families and students' propensity to study abroad in the US or other countries? How does this impact domestic Chinese universities?
That's a good question. I think that New Oriental just did a survey. Typically, you have about a ratio of 4 to 5 to 1 of US people going to US versus going to the UK. But I think that now you have New Oriental come up with a new survey where the majority of them say they want to go to the UK instead of US. I think the US rhetoric on this China-US trade or Cold War, whatever you want to call it, I think is becoming more and more intensive going forward, particularly with the uncertainty of visas. And, you know, if you were to send a child to go study in a boarding school in the US today, with COVID, with visa, and, you know, a lot of other uncertainties, you worry as a parent. So I would say that, you know, the study abroad has definitely, interest has come down. It's impacted, say, New Oriental's numbers as well for study abroad in the public markets. But I think that, you know, there are other markets that are available. Australia is opening up tremendously to Chinese students. The UK is hoping to pick up some as well. So I think that, you know, Canada, so I think that, you know, there will be a large population, because I think that, you know, again, it's very sad to keep repeating this. China is a big market. All you need is a very, very small number of them to go to one country, and that makes the country's numbers, right? So a small number of them go to Australia, university numbers boom. So again, it comes down to if you were living in China, all of you, and you had children that are 15, 16-year-old, and they're going through this very, very rigorous program called the Gaokao. You know, if some of you are parents on this call, you realize that not all children are supposed to go to the best universities. So, you know, if you can't manage the stress of the Gaokao because everything is dependent on one exam, then you might put them in a different system, or you might find that the system is more rigid and therefore you want a different system, all your call. But I think that, you know, there's sufficient demand for outside of, that means a different curriculum. So I think that the study abroad will be a blip, but I think that all you need are a few percentage points of students in China that want to go abroad. That makes the study abroad market extremely huge.
So we have another question coming from Faye. She asked, where do most of the China edtech come from? Is it Beijing? Is it Shanghai? Just come from like a regional perspective. How would you summarize that?
I would say that China edtech is based in Beijing.
I see. Is there any regional kind of development? Because we know that the Gaokao system in China is quite intensive. Out of the, you know, granted China's capital for technology is Beijing. How about competition with like Shenzhen or some of the other tech cities?
I think that in Beijing, there's a region called Haidian, which is in the northwest of corner of Beijing, if you want to call it. And that's where all the after-school tutoring offline guys are based. New Oriental is based there. Tal is based there. Pusing is based there. And so they're all centered around there. And from that group, you then had the offline guys emerge, the online guys emerge. Most of the tech companies, you know, like ByteDance are all based in Beijing as well, Baidu. So I think that, you know, you see Shenzhen try to. So for example, I was mentioning Dingdong Ketang, which is the avatar deepfake kind of like a one-on-one avatar teacher that's based in Shenzhen. So I think you do see some in Shenzhen, but I would say, you know, more than 80% is based in Beijing.
Thank you. That was a great Q&A session. Thank you everyone for joining. I know it's close to our end time for the seminar, so please raise your hand if you have any other questions. Well, I would just like to thank Edwin for joining us today. Again, MarketX is a pre-IPO investment platform that helps people with investing globally, especially in late-stage venture deals. And we have the pleasure today to host Edwin to talk about China education tech, as we're looking at Zuoyebang, Yuanfudao, some of these largest technology names in China. Feel free to ask us any questions or DM us. I will provide our email, also Edwin's contact information below. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
And thank you everybody for your time and for your questions. I really enjoyed the session, and let me know if you guys want to speak more about the topic.
Thank you, everyone.